Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Grant Park 165 at the Chicago Street Course here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Nashville, Joey Logano won after 5 overtimes, which locks Joey Logano into the playoffs. He did not yet have a win this year. Joey Logano outlasted, besting Zane Smith and Tyler Reddick, who finished second and third in a race that, man, it came down to so many things, Steve. It came down to fuel mileage. It came down to strategy. It came down to speed. It came down to luck. A whole bunch of stuff going on there with Nashville. So what are your thoughts on that absolutely ridiculous, crazy race?
I nailed Nashville up until like 3 green, white checkers.
Yeah, exactly.
Had the race just ended when Austin Cindric spun, we were sweeping the running hot.
Yep.
Like you and I we were 8-1. We had missed our victory lane pick, which it was Truex to win, but you had
but I had Hamlin to win, yeah.
Yeah, you had Hamlin to win. So we were sweeping. Betting was going to absolutely smash for me. And I mean, I tweeted this out. Like I had an $8,000 DFS swing plus a live final qualifier seat. So brutal end. Wow. Like Nick, like the race is going green and I'm like, man, all my guys have gas. I'm sitting good. I'm like 12 points up to win all this money. And Truex and Suarez like got into each other. And it was a tilting end of the race. Overall, happy for Joey. I mean, I think NASCAR as a whole is better when Joey Logano is in the playoffs. He's had some good runs this year and hasn't been able to finish. I thought it was funny when Denny Hamlin was talking about how he wasn't fast enough to burn as much gas as them. So I thought that was kind of funny. But, yeah, I mean, happy for Joey. Would have loved to see Zane Smith get his first win. That would have been awesome.
That would have been wild.
Really thought Tyler Reddick was going to win the race at the end of that thing. I thought Bubba had a legit chance to win the race there towards the end. So, yeah, I mean, wild. I think that was the right name for it. But, 5 overtimes is too many. It's like 4 too many. But it was exciting. It was fun to watch. And, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're kind of hoping for, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it was highly entertaining. And for me personally, like, obviously the bets didn't go well because of all that. Like you said, we were absolutely smashing, but I feel like I handicapped the race perfectly. But for me personally, as far as the race, I kind of loved it. Like every once in a while, you just like, we get the truck series kind of races that just go to pure chaos and mayhem every once in a while. But in the Cup series, this doesn't really happen as much. I love when we get like 1 or 2, a year. And I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was awesome. I honestly didn't really care that much that I lost my bets because I was so entertained. And give me 5 overtimes all day. I don't want a fixed number of overtimes because then you come into these situations like Kevin Harvick at Talladega a few years ago where you can just manipulate the outcome by causing a caution on the last overtime, right? So definitely I don't think a solution needs to be made for this, but I don't think if there was a solution to be made, it would be to limiting the number of overtimes because then we open up the scenarios of manipulating race outcomes again. And that's definitely not what we want. So I thought it was great. I really enjoyed the race. Bets obviously were really good until they weren't really good. So unfortunate for us, Stevie, this past week, but have a feeling we'll be able to hopefully redeem some of that this week as we head to Chicago. So we are heading to the streets of Chicago for the second annual Grant Park 165 on the streets of Chicago, downtown Chicago. The Grant Park 165 is going to be pretty interesting this year because last year, obviously, it rained for a lot of that race, and then it started to dry at the very end. We have a full 40-car field this weekend, Stevie, so that's exciting as well. It's always nice to have a bigger car count. Makes it, a much more important race. We got some big names coming in here. Obviously, Shane Van Gisbergen is coming back. And when I say bigger names, like we even have Joey Hand, who's going to be racing for Roush Fenwick Keselowski Racing. And that doesn't sound like a bigger name, but he had some good runs for Rick Ware Racing. I'm very curious to see what he's going to do with RFK. But let's talk about racing at Chicago, Stevie, because I don't know if we've gotten a full taste of it yet, given the fact that we had a rain race last year. What are we expecting this weekend?
Tight corners, really fast. A lot of decisions made. Pit road being very important. We saw passing last
Yeah.
year. Like, obviously the track was different because it was raining, like you mentioned. But if we could pass in the rain, we could definitely pass like a dry racetrack as well. Like SVG was able to make ground up towards the end of that race, making a lot of passes. So I thought that was like the thing that we were worried about the most last year going into that race was, can we pass on a street course with these NASCAR cars? And I think they proved that. But yeah, I mean, it's really fast. It happens really fast. And drivers talk about like the racetrack being right on top of them. Like when we go to Sonoma, for instance, like there's a lot of wiggle room if you miss a corner. You miss a corner in Chicago, you hit the wall. I mean, how many times did we see guys hit the wall last year? So
Noah Gragson probably 5 times himself.
Yeah, it was wild. Kyle Busch, like he had a lot of issues last year and spinning around. So, I mean, yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Racing at Chicago is different than any other road course that we go to as far as just the racetrack is right on top of them. The walls are right on top. There's very, very little room for error. And I think that's why SVG won the race last year is he was better than everybody else about pushing the limits. And that's, why he won.
Yeah, well, you make a great point there. You don't have as much margin for error as we have at every single other road course on the whole circuit that we race at in the Cup Series. You can, abuse the track limits at these other courses, for lack of a better term, or a Formula One type term here. But you can't abuse the track limits on a street circuit because, like you said, you hit the wall. So getting the most out of your car without hitting the wall is what it's going to take to be successful here. So with that said, you kind of mentioned it. Do we have any comparable tracks? I mean, obviously, we don't have any others with walls lining the whole track as far as road courses, but are there ways to use other road courses or any other tracks, honestly, to handicap this?
So I look more at the traditional road courses for overall speed. Coda, Sonoma, Watkins Glen, more than looking at the Roval or Indy road course. Like, I want technical, really good braking road course drivers at a racetrack like Chicago. So I will use a little bit of track data in my model. I'm going to input a little bit of practice data as well, like I always do. I went back to last year's practice data, and the cars that were fast in practice were really fast, the cars that were in the race. So it correlated very highly from practice and qualifying, really. So, yeah, I mean, as far as track comps for me, I'll be looking at the technical road courses. I'm not even going to include like the Roval and stuff. And yeah, I mean, practice is important this week.
To me, I think you include Indy. It is flat, like the Chicago street course, right? So I think that matters a lot. I think being able to have certain techniques on flat turns, flat road course turns is going to matter. So I still will use Indy, but I agree with you. I'm not really using Charlotte Roval. Even though it's flatter, it has a lot more banking in the turns than on the Roval part than Indy does. So I do think I will use all of them, but I think the least will be the Charlotte Roval, and then I'll use, like I said, everything else, the technical road courses, and I think I'll use some of the Indy road courses as well, just because of all the flat corners, and we'll have a lot of flat corners here at the Chicago street course as well. So obviously, we're only 7 races out from the end of the regular season, and this comes up every time we talk about road courses, but it gets more and more and more important to talk about as we get closer and closer and closer to the playoffs, is which drivers are going to be points racing, which drivers are racing for the win, which could go maybe either way. What are your thoughts just currently on the playoff scenario, right? So Alex Bowman currently is the bubble driver in terms of the NASCAR Cup Series standings playoffs, with Joey Logano getting the win. That moved the cut line up. Well, I mean, he's behind Alex Bowman, but it moved the cut line up to Alex Bowman, who is 51 points to the good on Bubba Wallace. But if we get a new winner, then all of a sudden Alex Bowman, if he's the bottom car, in terms of points of those that are inside the cut line, all of a sudden he's outside. So while he is 51 points to the good on Bubba Wallace, he's only 5 points behind Chris Buescher, so it doesn't seem like Chris Buescher is very safe. He's only 15 points, Alex Bowman, behind Ross Chastain, and Alex Bowman's only 19 points behind Ty Gibbs, and Martin Truex Jr. is way up there, has almost a 73-point cushion on Ty Gibbs. So seems like Truex is pretty safe, but that quartet of Gibbs, Chastain, Buescher, and Bowman, I don't think they're very safe. How do we handicap those drivers? How do we handicap the drivers outside? Bubba Wallace, who, like I said, is 51 points behind. Chase Briscoe, a little bit further back than that, 27 points behind Bubba Wallace. Kyle Busch even further back there. What are we doing here, man? What's going on with the playoff scenarios?
Yeah, we saw different kinds of strategies at Sonoma. Our most recent, it was June 9th. So like right at a month ago by the time this race rolls around this weekend. So we saw all kinds of different strategies, but I mean, it's hard to argue that Tyler Reddick had the best car at Sonoma before he had the issues. And they stayed out and won stage one, and he got the issues because he was back in the pack and, got stuck in some stuff where Kyle Larson, he stayed out in the first stage, and then they did a completely different strategy. So we saw multiple strategies at Sonoma. And I think Chicago is going to be a little bit different because I think we're going to see a little bit more tire wear at Chicago than we did at Sonoma. Sonoma's fresh repave. And then if we go back to COTA, it was so early in the season. Like, it's March. Yeah. Christopher Bell had an opportunity to win the first stage. He took it. Is he going to take that now, that where he's at, if he's, in an opportunity? So I think the guys that you mentioned are the guys that we're really concerned about. I think Gibbs is on the race-winning strategy because that's what they've done mostly so far. We didn't get to see him at Sonoma because he had the issue on lap 10 or 12 or whatever it was. Yeah. So we didn't even get to see his strategy, but overall, I think Gibbs is in a position to go for a race win. I think Ross Chastain, Chris Buescher are on the fringe, but I think Alex Bowman has to point race if he has the opportunity to point race. He's not a guy that is this rock star road course racer, and I think Buescher, he has the opportunity to win the race. He's in a position where he needs to take it. Alex Bowman, he point races potentially, or he gets on the right winning. If you're on the right strategy, you could finish inside the top 15 without having a top 15 car because you're passing so many people. So I think it's do I have the opportunity to finish top 5 in a stage, or do I have the opportunity to win a race? So, I mean, if you have a race win, it opens up the doors to be aggressive and take a stage win because that playoff point is huge. But, I mean, it's so hard because we can look back at data from 2 years ago when we had the stage cautions, and it's all over the place. There's no one that's consistent. I will say Michael McDowell's crew chief is aggressive when it comes to this kind of stuff, and he's the one guy that I feel is going to be on the race-winning strategy, whether he has an 8th place car or a 15th place car.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're Michael McDowell, you have to win, and this is one of your few opportunities to win, given just how you tend to fare if you're Michael McDowell at all these other racetracks aside from the super speedways and the road courses. So he definitely will be on the winning strategy if at all possible. I definitely agree with you. Alex Bowman should be points racing. I tend to think Chris Buescher should be points racing as well. Even Ross Chastain, and honestly, I even think Ty Gibbs should be points racing unless he feels like he has a race-winning car. And in that case, he can go for the race-winning strategy. And I do think there's a good chance he has a winning car. So I think Ty Gibbs is the one that I could see going either way. A little bit less so Ross. I think, he still wants to probably points race, even though he's great at road courses. Chris Buescher, obviously great at road courses, but he's definitely not safe. He's only 5 points ahead of Bowman. And Bowman, he's not an amazing road course racer, but he's amazing at COTA. And I think he could be good at this particular racetrack as well. Alex Bowman really shines at COTA. He really shines at the Roval, which, again, we're not using a ton of, but it has a lot of flat turns outside of the banked part. And at the Indy Road Course, he's had a couple good finishes as well, a 5th place finish at the Indy Road Course just last year. So I think, 4 drivers that could go either way, points race for the win, depending on how their car is, makes it really interesting. But what that does is even if one of those 4 or 2 of those 4 points races, that opens up win probability, win equity for the other drivers that are on, winning scenarios here. So I don't really know which of these 4 drivers will points race or will go for the race win. But Stevie, you got to think at least one, if not 2 or even more, are going to be points racing, which I do think opens up some upside for some other drivers.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking below the cut line, I feel like everybody. I mean, maybe Bubba. Bubba might be the one guy that you're like, hey, he could potentially point race here. But I mean,
he doesn't have the upside at road courses,
right?
So he almost has to points race,
Yeah, and like maybe Barry points race, but like I feel like they have to be aggressive, and I feel like Rodney's going to be aggressive. But Briscoe, Kyle Busch, Todd Gilliland, Michael McDowell, Noah Gragson, like those 5 names, they have road course potential, and they're below the cut line. And I feel like this is a racetrack where you're circled and you're going to be aggressive. Corey LaJoy,
Absolutely.
like way out of the playoff picture, be aggressive. I mean, you're gonna short pit. You're gonna have an aggressive pit strategy to try to gain some type of track position. Because let's be honest, you're not going to a 1.5 and you're Todd Gilliland. You might run top 15, but you're not going to have a race winning car.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Corey LaJoy, he was another one of those from Nashville that we thought had a chance to win there for a little bit with
out of nowhere,
with the fuel and tire strategies and stuff. So I on the day of, I sprinkled LaJoy 27-1 top 10 and Hocevar 12-1 top 10. And both of them were sitting inside the top 10, and all those restarts, even those didn't work out. Even the chaos picks didn't end up working out. It was just
if
the
it makes
worst
you
luck ever.
If it makes you feel any better, I bet AJ top 10 at 10-1 on Sunday morning, and he finished 11th. So if that makes you feel any better.
No, it doesn't. But we can commiserate together on our what could have been. So I think that is going to do it for our Chicago preview. It is time to dive into some bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around the track. In this case, we're just going to do 4 turns instead of all of the turns because it's, quite a hefty number of turns here at a road course. But we're going to do 4 turns, 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from myself per turn before we drive into victory lane. So we're going to throw the green flag on the Grant Park 165 and dive into turn 1. All right, turn 1, Stevie, you and I have a pair of top 10 bets. What's your top 10 bet here?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Justin Haley for a top 10 here at plus 360. Haley's a really good road course racer. And like, I think our Rick Ware Racing like equipment has proved itself enough that like you have to have a little bit of interest in Justin Haley. Like he's way below the cut line. He doesn't care about winning a stage. They need to go out and be on an aggressive strategy to give him a chance to win this race. And that's going to give him a good opportunity to finish inside the top 10. I mean, this is a guy that finished second last year, different equipment. And I mean, there is a point that we thought Justin Haley was going to win that race last year. The track went dry towards the end, and he was one of the fastest cars. Like, he had clean air. He had a lot of stuff going for him, but he still had enough speed to be up there. So he's been kind of hit or miss on the 2 road course races this season, but the speed has been okay. And I think when we're looking at the speed potentially being okay, the aggressiveness that they should bring this weekend, I mean, he was really solid at COTA. He was a top 15 car in speed at COTA. So, I mean, I like Justin Haley a lot this week, and this is one that I had written down like a week and a half ago to check as soon as the lines came out, and I wanted to jump on this one pre-practice and pre-qualifying.
Absolutely. And I mean, just look at his recent form. 4 of the last 7 races, he's finished 13th or better. And we're talking at Nashville, Iowa, Gateway, and even Darlington, right? So this is a Rick Ware Racing car, and they have 2 top 10s in the last 7 races with Justin Haley on traditional ovals. That's unheard of for Rick Ware Racing. So this is a team, Rick Ware Racing, that is improving. The team is improving. Justin Haley is driving amazing. So I agree with you. I think a top 10 bet on Justin Haley, very warranted, especially given how good he is at road courses and how well he performed at this race last year. For my turn 1 pick, I'm going to go to Austin Cindric, who recently grabbed a race win at Gateway, which again is one of those tracks that Justin Haley just had one of his good runs at. Austin Cindric top 10 plus 250. And I wrote this up at actionnetwork.com. I think, with Austin Cindric, we're getting a guy that he's really good at road course races, right? He's had a couple of rough road course races so far this year, but if you look at his history, out of 17 career road course starts, he's finished in the top 10 7 times. That would equate to around plus 143 as fair odds if that was his true long-term rate. And I don't think it's that far off of his true long-term rate, especially knowing that Austin Cindric just won at a flat track, and this is going to be a flat road course in Gateway. And of course, Chicago is going to be a flat road course. And looking last year at the flat road course at Indy, Austin Cindric had another good run. So I just think we're getting a guy who's, road course racing is one of his specialties, and we're getting a plus 250. Plus, we know Austin Cindric is going to be on the optimal race strategy here. He's got a win in the bag. The only thing that'll help him out at this point isn't points racing. It's going for a win.
Yeah, I love this one. I've already bet this one too. You and I talked about it pre-show, and I'm right there with you on Austin Cindric this week. Like, we are quick to forget like how good of a road course racer he is because of how bad Ford was last year, just in general. And now that like Ford is showing us speed, we know that Austin Cindric's going to eventually like have that like snap. He's gonna be competing for wins at road courses. He's too good of a road course racer. Like, he was doing it against these guys in the Xfinity series. Like, Kyle Busch would come down and Cindric would put it on Kyle Busch and stuff. So no doubt that I have a lot of interest here in Austin Cindric's top 10.
Absolutely. And I also took his outright 50-1. I mean, Stevie, a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he was 12-1 in some races to win road courses. He's 50-1 right now, and he has a win in the bag already. So we know he's going on the optimal strategy, if at all possible. So Austin Cindric, top 10 plus 250 is my bet. If you can get 50-1 out there, still like that as well. So that is turn 1. We're going to go into the next corner and take turn 2. All right, turn 2, Stevie. This one, you've got an outright winner here. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go to my boy, AJ Allmendinger, at 15-1 to win this race. I mean, it's just a staple bet for me at this point. Yep. Anytime we go to a road course and AJ is anything more than like 13-1 pre-practice and qualifying, I'm just going to bet it. I mean, he's not running full-time. He doesn't care about points. We saw that at Sonoma. They were really aggressive with strategy at Sonoma, and there's no reason for them not to be aggressive at this race as well as far as strategy. So absolutely love AJ. I mean, like, AJ's competition now is like, hey, I want to be better than, SVG because, that's the guy that's coming into my house in this Xfinity series and putting it on me. So AJ is an excellent breaker, and when we look at Chicago, again, braking is going to be a huge thing. He's a top 5 guy in speed since the start of 2023 on road courses. He's a top 5 guy this year at COTA and Sonoma. No reason that AJ should be 15-1 pre-practice and qualifying, so I'm going to jump on this one because if he practices or qualifies inside the top 10, this line's going to move.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Look, AJ Allmendinger, since he joined JTG Doherty, and then since has driven for Colleague Racing, he has run 31 road course races, and he has 3 wins, right? So that's like 1 out of every 10 races, which is around 9-1 as fair odds. So like you said, if you get him 13-1 or longer, you kind of just have to bet him, especially in this stage era of racing where it actually makes it a little bit easier for some of these guys to get a win because they can go on this optimal strategy when they're not points racing. So yeah, right there with you, AJ Allmendinger, 15-1, definitely like that. For me, I'm going to go with one of the guys we talked about in the playoff picture scenario bubble, and I am going to take Alex Bowman for a top 10 finish. Now, I don't love his upside. I'm not picking him for a top 3 or 5 to win, those kinds of things. But I still think even if you points race, you can grab a top 10 finish if you have a good car, if you are a good road course racer. And Alex Bowman, frankly, is a good road course racer. I mean, we look at COTA. He has finishes of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th each of the last 3 years, the 3 years in the next gen era. Indy road course, like I mentioned, he finished 5th last year, which is the flat one. Just like, Chicago is going to be flat here. Roval in the next gen car, Charlotte Roval, 8th and 10th, right? So this is a guy who's actually finished inside the top 10 more than he's finished outside the top 10 in the next gen era at road course races as a whole, or right around 50-50. And so, my model has him around 38%, I think it is, to finish inside the top 10. And that, of course, isn't counting for strategy. I do think we need to reduce that a little bit, given the fact that he could be on a points racing strategy. But still, plus 330, I mean, you only need around 23% chance to finish inside the top 10, 23% there to, end up as a profitable bet long term. And I have him at 38%. So there's a lot of wiggle room here between 23%, 24%, and 38% that my model has. And I do think, some of that should be eaten into from my model, given the strategy, but not 15% worth.
Yeah, Bowman, last year was out of this race really early. So that, the race was wet, but if we look at this year, he finished fourth at Coda, 15th at Sonoma. The top 10 upside is certainly there. If we expand it even more, he's finished top 10 in 4 of 8 races, so 50% since the start of last season. So you mentioned how good he is at Coda. Again, a technical road course. So, I really hope that if Alex Bowman has a top 5 car, I really hope that they're like, hey, let's try to get that win. It's a Hendrick car. Let's go get that win and, potentially finish top 10 is definitely there for Alex Bowman. But my downside, and I'll say it, and I'm going to say it with my next pick as well. You're super worried about, hey, we have the opportunity to get some stage points. Let's lock up some points here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that certainly is a part of why he's plus 330 instead of, maybe plus 220, 250, somewhere in that neighborhood, where I'd be a lot closer to in terms of his probability to finish inside the top 10. But 2 turns down, we are halfway through a lap around the Chicago street course. Before we complete the lap, I want to remind you all, Running Hot is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Stevie, let's complete the lap here and take a dive into turn 3. All right, you mentioned it. Another guy potentially who could be points racing here as your turn 3 pick. Stevie, what do you got?
Yeah, if I knew he wasn't going to points race, I think I'd bet his outright this week. But I'm worried about him, points racing. So I'm going to go to Ross Chastain for a top 10 at plus 155. I love this number just overall for a guy that has had a ton of speed this season on road courses. He ranks 3rd in speed. He was fast at Coda. He was fast at Sonoma. He got extra time with the road course package when he did the testing at Sonoma for a whole day. We talked about that when we were at Sonoma. So definitely showed he had a lot of speed in that car. And, this is a guy that has plenty of potential to potentially win this race. Potential to potentially win.
I love it.
But, yeah, if I knew he wasn't going to points race, I'd bet his outright. To limit my risk a little bit here, I'm going to bet his top 10. I think Chastain will be in the mix to win this race if he's on the right strategy, but I think he's going to be in the mix to get a top 10 either way.
Yeah, it's kind of the Alex Bowman thing here. I want to, bet his top 3 or 5 upside, especially given how good he's been at Coda, but just can't quite do that given the fact that potentially Ross Chastain could go on, an alternate strategy here of racing for points, and same thing for Alex Bowman. So right there with you. Love Ross Chastain in this situation in terms of what he could do here. It's just the strategy that could hold him back, which is why I think a top 10 bet is the prudent bet if you're backing Ross Chastain. For me, I'm going to a top 10 bet as well. I'm going to take Todd Gilliland for a top 10 finish at plus 550. Now, Todd Gilliland just did finish 10th at Sonoma, our most recent road course race. And Todd Gilliland is on a tear, Stevie. If we look at the last 8 races, he's finished between 10th and 17th in every single race. And none of those are drafting races, right? Normally we talk about Todd Gilliland if we go to Daytona or Talladega. He's a guy who, could find himself in the mix for a top 5 or even a win if the situation plays itself outright. But no, we're talking Dover, Kansas, Darlington, Charlotte, Gateway, Sonoma, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nashville, all traditional ovals and 1 road course. And the road course was the best of his 8 finishes, finishing 10th place at Sonoma. So I think you kind of just have to go with a hot hand here. And we also know Todd Gilliland's going to be in an optimal race strategy. He's not in the playoffs. He's not going to point his way into the playoffs. So he has to go for a win here. And this team has been improving. He's been improving. He's getting more comfortable in the next gen car, just in cup cars in general. So I think Todd Gilliland plus 550 for a top 10 finish is just enough value. I wouldn't play this below maybe like 5-1, but I think 5-1 or 5.5-1 is good enough for me.
Yeah, I think you sold me. I debated on betting this, and I was just like debating it, and like I think he's below the cut line enough where this is a great opportunity for him to, short pit and try to win this race. And I mean, McDowell has been so aggressive doing it as well. Man, Todd Gilliland, his crew chief, is just calling awesome races right now.
Yes.
So, like, putting Todd Gilliland in excellent positions, they didn't give up on this guy. They had an easy opportunity to kick this guy to the curb when, his dad's team went from Ford to Toyota. They believe in him. And, I mean, I see why. Like, the talent is there. This is the difference between like Harrison Burton losing his ride and Todd Gilliland not losing his ride. Like we're seeing improvement in Todd Gilliland, and Harrison Burton is kind of flatlining without improvement in potentially better equipment. So, I mean, I like this top 10, and like I said, I think you finally sold me. I was debating, and I think I want to jump on this one too. Just his crew chief alone, take away everything else. His crew chief alone makes me want to bet this one.
Yeah, and remember, he finished 4th at the Indy Road Course in 2022. So obviously that was the great exploding curb race of NASCAR history. But you still have to put yourself in position to get that. And I mean, look at another flat track. They always say Martinsville's the oval that kind of drives like a road course in some ways. That's why we see AJ Allmendinger, Marcus Ambrose always did so well at Martinsville. Todd Gilliland has finishes of 13th, and 10th at Martinsville in his career. Among the 5 Martinsville races he has raced. So I mean, 60% of the time he's finishing 13th or better at another track that I wouldn't say is a comp to Chicago, but it's not a bad data point to be good at Martinsville when other road course drivers, Montoya as well, was good at Martinsville. So I'm going to take Todd Gilliland top 10 plus 550. Don't think I'd bet it down below 5-1, but definitely like it at plus 550. That means we have 1 turn left, and that's turn 4. All right, final turn, Stevie. We're on the same bet here. This isn't our victory lane pick, but you and I both typed this separately into the outline. So we're on this pick as well as our victory lane pick. So just give us the turn 4 pick here.
Yeah, we're going to go to Ty Gibbs as the top Toyota. I am so close to betting his outright, and I'm like patiently waiting and trying to decide because it really hasn't moved much. I mean, again, we didn't really see him at Sonoma because he had the issues, but man, was he fast at COTA. Has he been incredibly fast in the Xfinity Series with the road course racing? And we've seen a ton of upside for him in the Cup Series with the next gen car. I mean, this is a guy that's finished top 5 in 3 of the last 4 road course races. So if we get a dry track, and like we should like at least mention that he's getting extra track time. He's running the Xfinity race this weekend too. So not typically something that matters too much because the cars are so different, but extra track time at a place like this, I think is huge. So, I mean, Larson's running the Xfinity race. Like, if you want to know how important this racetrack is, look at who's running the Xfinity race this weekend. Yeah. So, I mean, I think Ty Gibbs, Tyler Reddick, Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, all these guys are fantastic. I mean, Denny's been kind of all over the place, but we know he has the upside to be a good road course racer when he's not blowing the engine on the lap 2. So it's tough, but I don't think that Ty Gibbs should be 6-1 when he ranks 2nd in speed behind Tyler Reddick in Toyota speed.
I agree. 100% agree. And that's why I had Ty Gibbs 6-1 for top Toyota as well as my turn 4 pick. I mean, I'm like you said, I'm close to betting his outright. And I think, like you mentioned, a really good point here with that track time in the Xfinity Series. Remember, it's not like we're going to Kansas, which we've been to 5 million times, or we're going to, some other oval we've been to 5 million times. We've been to this racetrack one other time, and it rained. So getting experience on this track is massive right now because not many people, almost none of these drivers have experience in the dry on this track. A few may have run the Xfinity race last year, gotten a few, practice dry laps in last year. And then the very end of the races, it dried out last year as well. But that's not a lot of dry track time to have here. So I think you're right. I think the track time is huge. And in the Xfinity series for Ty Gibbs. And I mean, this is just a guy who's so good at road courses. Ty Gibbs is obviously he hasn't had the Cup Series results finishes yet that we want to see at road courses. He did finish third at Coda, which is very encouraging. But fifth at Watkins Glen last year. But this is a guy who just destroyed the field in Xfinity a handful of times at road courses in his 1.5 seasons in the Xfinity series, if you will, because he really only ran one full-time season, I should say, in the Xfinity series, because his first year in 2021, he wasn't allowed to race every race until he turned old enough to be able to run every race. So Ty Gibbs, road course race, amazing. I mean, dominated Daytona road course his rookie year in Xfinity. Watkins Glen, he won that dominating fashion. And then his second year, his full-time year, he won it at Road America. So, I mean, he's just – and then last year, won Indy road course in terms of Xfinity as well. So he has 4 Xfinity Series wins on road courses. Hasn't translated yet to the Cup Series, but I think it's pretty close. And I like the top Toyota look because it avoids the Allmendingers. It avoids the Shane Van Gisbergens, right? It avoids the Michael McDowells or the Chris Buschers that could, potentially be on a race winning strategy that are great road course racers themselves. So definitely like this top Toyota look. 6-1 for Ty Gibbs. So that is a lap around the Chicago street course. I kind of mentioned this guy just now, Stevie, but we have one thing left to do: drive into victory lane. So, Stevie, what's our victory lane pick?
Yeah, we're gonna go to an outright, and we're actually last week I wasn't showing a ton of value on outrights, and this week I'm showing a lot of value. I feel like SVG is being a little overvalued by the books, and it's opened up some value elsewhere. And I'm going to go to Michael McDowell at 14-1 with you. And you and I both like this one. You had it in the sheet, and we had multiple picks in the sheet that we liked this week. So this is a running hot episode of where we're on the same page. We like a lot of the same stuff. I think I've bet almost everything that you talked about. I've bet everything that I've talked about. So, Michael McDowell and his crew chief, they're going to be aggressive. This is the opportunity. They're minus 166 points. They're not getting in on points right now. This is the chance. Like, you have to have this race circled. If you're Michael McDowell, you probably have Daytona circled where you have a potential chance to win as well. You have to circle this one. You have to be aggressive, and you have to be on the right strategy to give yourself an opportunity to win this race. We just saw it at Sonoma, and I think we're going to see it again here this weekend. He stayed out a little bit more than I thought he would in the first stage, but they were very aggressive after that, and I think we see just full-on aggressiveness from Michael McDowell this weekend, and I know you're right there with me.
Absolutely, 100% there with you. I wrote up as my number one bet in my article earlier this week at Action Network, Michael McDowell to win 14-1. I actually bet him 16-1 at the Open at BetMGM. He is now 13-1 at BetMGM. I'm totally fine with 13. I know I said bet 14 in my article, but now that I've dug into it deeper, I do feel more confident about my model's projection, which is plus 1270 as fair odds. And again, I think that could be a little underrated. He could be closer to 11 or 12-1 as fair odds if we reduce some of the win probability for those bubble boys like, Chris Buescher, Alex Bowman, Ross Chastain, guys that we've talked about that may have to points race, and Bubba Wallace as well. Not that he has a lot of win equity, but any reduction elsewhere increases everybody else's win probability, their win equity. So I said 14-1 earlier this week. I think I could take this down to 13-1 at BetMGM if that's what you have available to you. So Michael McDowell to win the Grant Park 165 is our victory lane pick. That is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Grant Park 165 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. Stevie and I will be back next week as we talk bets for the Great American Getaway 400 at Pocono Raceway, one of my favorite racetracks. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.